Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is the Texarkana Moonlight murders. Now, this is a topic that is, I would say, relatively popular in social media and pop culture today. It's a topic that people tend to know a little bit more about than other things that I've talked about. But just a disclaimer, this does have some really graphic material in it. It's talking about a bunch of murders. It's not for the faint of heart. It is also not for a younger audience. If you are not comfortable with your younger listeners listening to this, I wouldn't be. It's pretty dark. So just as a disclaimer, this is not going to be an episode that's for super young listeners, but come back next week and we might have something for you then. So, the Texarkana Moonlight murders are a series of unsolved murders and violent crimes that were committed in or around Texarkana in the spring of 1946. The newspaper named the perpetrator the Phantom Killer or the Phantom Slayer, and nobody ever identified who the Phantom Killer was. So this is basically a cold case. True crime, cold case. I know that that's a hot topic for people to listen to, so stick around if that's something that you're into. But yeah, sort of a serial killer, I suppose, but mostly just like into the violence. He wasn't so much about the murders, as we'll get into. You'll kind of understand that more. They attacked 8 people in 10 weeks. They killed 5 and wounded 3. And this actually caused Texas Rangers to come down, and it basically threw the town into a full-blown panic. Like, when this was going on at the time, this had never happened before. This was a small little town. Nothing like this had ever happened, and it threw the whole town into a panic, and the Texas Rangers were trying to help, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the town created a bunch of rumors about the crimes that, like, actually discounted what the Rangers were doing, and it caused more issues than helping. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's start with the crimes themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about the film that was made after and some other pop culture references that are involved. So the first murder was actually the second attack. So the first murder that this person did was actually the second offense that they committed. The first attack was on Jimmy Hollis, age 25, and Mary Jean Larry, age 19. And they were attacked in their car on a secluded road that was dubbed Lover's Lane in the town. So the attacker supposedly wore a white cloth mask. It was probably a pillowcase, both of the teens had said. And he ordered them both to get out of the car and then proceeded to hit Hollis on the head with the butt of his pistol twice. This actually ended up fracturing his skull, but both of these people ended up living. So imagine getting your skull fractured and living. That must be so painful. I cannot even imagine. He then told Larry to run. When she started to run one way, he said, no, not that way. When she ran the other way, she got to a car that was abandoned. It was probably his. And when he caught up with her, he said, why were you running? And she was like, well, you told me to. He called her a liar, proceeded to beat her and sexually assault her with the barrel of his gun. So he did not actually rape her, but he did rape her with his gun. Still bad, still really bad, but also allowed for him to get away without any DNA samples or anything like that. Also, this was 46. So this was right around the time when, like, it was really easy to get away with crimes, but there was enough technology that crime was becoming, like, more prominent, if that sort of makes sense. They both survived the attack, were both hospitalized, but Hollis was hospitalized for, I think, like a week or two because of the skull fractures. And they both had really conflicting accounts of who the attacker was, and what he was wearing and what he said. They both kind of had varying views. And a lot of people thought that they were covering up for who the attacker was because they knew the person. This was never confirmed. Nobody knows. But the main problem was that Hollis claimed that he was a 6 foot tall white man, and Larry claimed that he was a 6 foot tall African American man. They both knew that he was really tall and very, forbidding, but they didn't agree on his race, which kind of creates a problem when you're trying to make a profile. Because what are you supposed to do with that information? Like, that doesn't help at all, especially because a lot of serial killers tend to hunt in their own ethnicity group. So it tells you a lot about the profile. Like, if the killer was white, that tells us a little bit more. If he's, African American, that also tells us a little bit more. Like, that's some helpful information that was just kind of like not shared. So that was cool. The second attack was about a month later. This was the first murder. This was the first actual murder that happened. So the second attack, which was the first murder, was of Richard L. Griffin, age 29, and his girlfriend, Polly Ann Moore, who was 17. Also, side note, that's problematic. Just like, I know that this is the 40s, it's a different time, but he was 29 and his girlfriend was 17. Anyway, moving on. They were actually found the next morning by a passerby. So nobody heard the attack. Nobody knew anything that went on. Griffin had been shot twice while he was in the car, but both of them had been shot in the back of the head. There was dried blood on the ground near the car that led investigators to believe that they both had actually been taken out of the car, shot, and then placed back in the car. So we think that Griffin was shot twice when they both did not agree to get out of the car, taken out, laid down on the ground, sort of like execution style, shot in the back of the head, and then he took the bodies and replaced them back in the car. So this was very thought out, methodical. It wasn't like a rampage where he just showed up, shot people, and left. He killed them and then placed them, which is, I think that that's important to the psychosis of this individual, because if he didn't have remorse, or if he didn't have care for what he was doing, he would not have placed the bodies back in the car. He would have just left them, So anyway, they both have been shot. And this was when the Texas Rangers came down and they offered a $500 reward for info on the murderer, which led to about 100 false leads because people just wanted the money. So they would come in and be like, I know exactly who the killer is, blah, 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 blah. Go here. And then it would be like a false lead. It wouldn't lead to anything. And they would just try to collect the money. The third attack, which is his second set of murders. So he's already killed 2 people. He's wounded 2, just for those of you keeping score at home. The third attack was on Betty Jo Booker, age 15, and Paul Martin, age 17. Now, these people were not dating, which is, up until now, he's been with lovers, people that were dating in the car, 2 individuals, a boy and a girl. But Martin just came to pick Booker up from her weekly gig. She played alto sax at the VFW club. And when he picked her up, that was the last time that they were ever seen alive together again. So Martin was found the next morning, and Booker was found about 2 miles away, but about 5 hours later. So they found Martin's body by the car on the side of the road at 6:30, and they did not find Booker's body until 11:30. So they really had a hard time finding her. Both of them had been shot multiple times, but it looked like Martin took the brunt of the assault. He looked like he was shot a bunch of times. I think he was shot over 4 times. Booker's body was actually laid on its back, fully clothed, and her right hand was sitting in her coat pocket. This is really interesting because the body of Martin was just left. He didn't bother with Martin's body. but he bothered moving Booker's body into a position and putting her hand in her pocket. Like, that's very deliberate. Like, I highly doubt that she died on her back with her hand in her pocket. Like, that just seems so unlikely, which means that he toiled with the body after murdering them, which is so dark. Like, only a really sick individual would be able to like move a body around after murdering them, you know? Anyway, it was realized that the same weapon was used in both murders, which was a 32 automatic Colt pistol. So the same gun was used in both scenes of the crime. And it's believed that he had a big blanket that he kind of put over the gun to like silence it so it wasn't like super loud. The examinations showed a ton of bruises and a lot of clear indicators that there was a large struggle. So both of them really fought back with the Phantom Killer. They did not go down easy, is what that says. The bounty then moved up. So now the newspaper started calling it the Phantom Killer, the Phantom Slayer, whatever. And the bounty was now up to $1,700 at the time. At the time, $1,700 was like $14,000 today. So if you knew anything about this person and they apprehended him based on what you told them, you would get $14,000. So now this town is starting to circulate with these rumors like, oh, it's the preacher's son. Oh, it's so-and-so down the street, blah, blah, blah. It's somebody that lives here, da, 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 da. And now the Rangers have all this info that's just not helping them. It's just absolutely not helping them at all. Our final assault was one murder and one wounded. So he's killed 4 people by now. He's injured 2. This is the first one where the couple got split up. One died and one didn't. So the final assault was the murder of Virgil Starks, age 37, and the assault of Katie Starks, age 36. This was a very average night for the couple. They lived on a farm, They were kind of in the middle of nowhere. And Katie went upstairs to read in her bedroom, whatever. Virgil was sitting downstairs and she said she didn't hear the shot. She says very clearly, I heard glass shatter and I wanted to know what was wrong. So she walked down the stairs to see Virgil had been shot in the head twice and was bleeding. So she went to go ring the police. As she's on the phone with the police, she gets shot in the right cheek and it exited out by her left ear. And then she got shot just below her lip and it ended up lodging underneath her tongue. So now her teeth are spewing everywhere. She's bleeding from her face. She went to go grab a pistol that was in the living room, but she was blinded by her own blood. And she started hearing the killer like ripping off pieces of the window to get into the house. So she runs upstairs and they do this whole Scooby-Doo chase scene where he's in the house and she's like slipping away and like sneaking around him and getting away, leaving like a literal pool of blood behind her. She manages to get out of the house. She runs to her neighbor's house. They're not home. So she runs 50 yards to her other neighbor's house. His name is A.V. Prater. And he answers her cry for help. He fires a gun in the air. He gets the neighbors involved. They take her to the hospital. She lived. Number one, this is terrifying. Like, this is possibly like a worse nightmare for a lot of people. Not myself. Like, I'd rather be killed in my home than like kidnapped and killed somewhere else. Like, I don't know if anybody has listened to or watched like any John Mulaney specials, but he has this bit where he talks about how he's terrified of secondary locations. He's like, because when you're a kid, you're taught that if you get taken to a secondary location, that's it for you. You're dead. And I agree with that. I'm very terrified of secondary locations. I don't know, something about like breaking into your home. Like, yeah, that's where you feel safe and all, but like at least you're dying in the comfort of your own home. That's so dark. That's dark even for me. But that seems like a better option than like being in this strange place with a stranger, getting killed. You got taken from where you feel safe. I don't know. Quicker death in your house seems better. So she survived, but again, she had like no info on who this person was. Nobody knew who it was. People are even unsure of whether or not this was the Phantom Killer. Like, officials kind of all agree that this was definitely him. But But nobody knows. This could have been a copycat. This could have been a completely different individual. Nobody knows. That's the problem when you don't have a strict person to follow who admits to these crimes and has the MO, is that these could have been crimes committed by copycats and nobody would have known. And it's not that they didn't think anybody had done it. They actually had a bunch of prime suspects, but they couldn't nail them on anything. And they were never really caught. So they all kind of got away. So regardless of if it was one of those prime suspects, I'm not really going to talk about them today because there's much more info to dive into. But if they would have, dug in a little bit deeper to those prime suspects, we don't know what might have happened, It's just really interesting to note. Another thing that's interesting to note is that the first murder happened, the first assault, not murder, the first 2 people lived. First assault happened on February 22nd. Then the second murder happened on March 24th. So about a month later. The third murder happened on April 13th. So that's a little bit of a shorter time gap. And the final assault happened on May 3rd. So he did start to escalate. He ended up waiting about a month, then a little bit under a month, then just a couple weeks. Like, his progression clearly started to escalate. And I think if he would have gotten away with that, the 2 murders in the house, I really believe that there would have been much more murders, which probably would have led to him getting caught. So this is where we run into a problem of like, is it worth it that those people sacrificed their lives so that we caught him? I mean, he stopped, quote unquote. We don't know. Maybe he continued in another state. Maybe he continued in another place. As far as we know, the Phantom Killer stopped after those final assaults. Maybe he realized that what he was doing wasn't working, or he felt like he wasn't good enough anymore. Maybe he killed himself. Like, we don't know what happened. But is it worth it just to have that closure of this person is gone, they won't be here anymore, and I can deal with that? So one of the things that's really interesting to note is that because the town was in such a panic, they all actually tried to catch the killer themselves. So not only were there rumors going around that circulated, police actually ended up doing like a statement that was like, please stop spreading rumors about who the killer is. We're doing our best. We're doing our job, and you spreading rumors is not helping. Like, literally, there's a police statement that's like, can you not gossip with Betty Joe down the street? Like, can you just fucking stop? Which is just, it's really funny to me. So the town tried to apprehend the killer with the police, which is really funny. There's actually a case of, there was a couple sitting in their car in Lover's Lane, and the police pulled up, and he walked over to the window with his flashlight, and he said, hi, I'm, sheriff such and such, whatever. Aren't you guys scared to be out here alone right now? And the girl in the car said, well, actually, mister, you're the one that should be really scared. I'm really glad you told me who you were. She told them that she had a pistol aimed at him the entire time that he was speaking. So there were couples, like young people, that were out there like, I'm going to catch him. I'm going to get him. And they were planning on like murdering the murderer. Like, the whole town was in like this wild, crazy fury of like, we have to catch this person. It was like a sort of like a monster, like torch and pitchfork sort of situation. So this became such a hot commodity that there was actually a film released in 1976. This was during the big like slasher film start. It was 2 years after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which kind of, it kind of really started the slasher franchise, I will say. Like, it was the first of its kind. There wasn't really a movie like it. If you'd like me to do an episode on Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the slasher franchise, let me know. That's one of my ideas. I think it would be fun. It was about 2 years after that. And it was a pretty like low budget film. If you watch it nowadays, you're like, wow, the effects are so terrible. It's so bad. But they wanted to tell I mean, this is where you run into a problem. They said that they wanted to tell like a true story. But the film is called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. It's based off the murders, but the problem is that it claims to be these like fully true events. The tagline, well, not really the tagline, but what it says at the start of the film is it says, "The incredible story you are about to see is true. Where it happened and how it happened, only the names have been changed." Which, like, that's not true. Because I'm pretty sure there's a scene in the movie when, like, he kills a girl, like, with a trombone or something weird like that. Like, that never happened, you know? But they took some artistic liberties, and it actually ended up um, creating more rumors and legends surrounding the murder and surrounding what had happened. And they kind of made him more infamous in making this film. They created all these like little details that aren't true that made people think they were true, which caused, I guess, like more of a panic. People were like, is this really what happened? Have we been lied to? You know, whatever, which is a problem. So the tagline of the film was, "In 1964, this man killed 5 people, dot, dot, dot. Today, he still lurks the streets of Texarkana, Arkansas." Now, that's not true. Like we don't know if he's still lurking there. We don't know if he's dead. We don't know, nobody knows. And the police ended up like threatening the director, who was Charles B. Pierce, over all the ads because it kind of made them look like dumbasses. Like if you're sitting there and you've been trying to work on this case for like a long time, and then somebody comes along and makes a movie that's like, hey, this person's still around, like, fuck you. Like, that would make me mad. I understand why they would be a little frustrated with that. But the tagline remained. No, like, lawsuits were ever filed as far as the tagline goes. Somebody did sue, I think, because it misrepresented how someone died that was close to them, and they didn't appreciate it. And so they, like, sued them, but they ended up winning the case, not the people. Some weird thing. But if you look throughout the film, a lot of residents in Texarkana at the time are actually extras in the film. So they filmed it like mostly in Arkansas, but they did film some stuff around Texarkana, and people wanted to be a part of it. It's a really big part of the town's like history and culture now. I mean, it's a really small town, and this is one of the only things that really happened around there that's like big news. So it's almost like they're almost proud of it in that town. And the reason that we know this is because every year around Halloween, the movie is shown in Spring Lake Park during this free event called Movies in the Park. So they play all these movies in Spring Lake Park, which is the park around where people had been murdered. And the last film that they show during Movies in the Park is The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I think that this is a little problematic simply because I understand that it's a part of the town's history and they want to, I mean, they're proud. It's almost, I guess there's a difference between being proud of the film and being proud of what happened. But when you're like, yeah, you can be proud that there's a film of your town. That's super cool. Like, nobody can deny that. But it's a movie about a serial killer that was never caught. And you're playing this every year around Halloween in the town where it happened. Like, it feels morbid. Like, even for me, that feels a little morbid. And I'm a sick person. Like, I am sick and twisted. I'm the first person where like someone gets cut, and before I do anything at all, like someone gets hurt or like breaks a bone, and before I call anybody, I'm like, can I take a picture? Or like, can I look at it a little bit longer before you go? I'm just curious. Somebody gets stitches, I'm like, let me see. Like I'm that person. But even for me, this seems a little dark and morbid, especially because it wasn't, I mean, it was long enough ago that the people that were like directly involved with it have probably mostly passed, but there are still people that remember that time. And that was really scary, and it was panicked, and it was horrifying. And so to kind of like play a movie that almost like parodies it is, I don't know, it just seems a little messed up to me. Personally, it seems messed up to me, but whatever. Um and this has been a tradition since 2003. So it's been a tradition for a pretty long time. I think the mayor came out with some sort of statement that was like, we are not condoning the actions of the individual um, that committed these crimes, but we are condoning the pride of our town being in a film or something weird like that. Oh, I don't know. It still seems really suspect to me, but whatever. I don't live there. And since then, the Texarkana Moonlight murders have kind of become like a pop culture phenomenon. They become a pop culture phenomenon. It's in numerous books, films. There were bands that made songs about it. It's been in TV shows, including Riverdale. So for all of you that love Riverdale, in something, I think one of the episodes in like 2017 in Riverdale, um, is about the Texarkana Moonlight murders. So it's still a thing that's happening like today. People are still talking about it. There was actually a film made in 2014 that had the exact same name. I'm unclear of whether or not it's like a sequel or like a rehashing of the original tale. I'm not really sure, but they redid it. It's called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and then in parentheses, it's like 2014 film because like they're different. But this is something that really sticks with people. Really sticks with people, and it's fascinating to me. Because what he did was like pretty basic. I mean, Zodiac did the same thing, right? He shot people in their cars. Son of Sam did the exact same thing, shot people in their cars. Like it's not that it's not that special. That sounds really terrible. Cause like he murdered people, but like it's not that special. The way he was doing it was not revolutionary. It wasn't anything new. We'd seen it before, whatever. Um, but it was the fact that it was such a small town and it happened so quickly. This was over 10 weeks, you know? Like normally months pass because they're still building up to their sort of psychosis. They're still figuring out what they have a taste for. This is something that I think I want to do either a 2-part episode or just a singular episode about like kind of how we know today that psychopaths and serial killers develop. It's so fascinating to just see like how the brain morphs into the state where they end up killing, you know, upwards of like 30 people. But you kind of have to figure out what you have a taste for, to figure out what you like, what are you into. And you kind of know that from the get-go, I would assume. Because like personally, if I was going to be a serial killer, love having the government watch me because I say things like this. If I was going to be a serial killer, I definitely wouldn't use a gun. I don't like it. I think it's lazy and easy. I don't think it would suit my needs. I would want to like be up close and personal. I'd want like a knife because I want them to bleed, you know. I think blood is super cool. I'm really going to be put on like a government watch list after this comes out. People are really going to think that I'm a murderer. I haven't killed anybody. I'm not going to kill anybody. But if I was, I'd use a knife most likely, or like a sword of some sort. I just think that that's more personal. I think it's more, it makes more sense to me than like a gun just seems so, a gun seems lazy, honestly. It seems lazy and gross. But yeah, I mean, this is a thing that people still talk about today. People are still really interested in it. They really truly are like fascinated in what happened. And if you'd like me to talk more about who the prime suspects were, and how they all sort of got away, that's something that I can talk about in a future episode. Because there's a lot more information about these murders. There's a lot more details. I can talk about the film. I think that might be fun. I was thinking about doing that this season, was talking about the film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and kind of how it differs from the actual context. Because the main thing that Pierce, who is the director, was trying to create was like a real life sort of telling of the stories of these people, but he ended up making it like so dishonest by adding all these little artistic gimmicks, which made it that much more interesting. Because now if people watch that film and it says, you know, this is a real life story, the only thing that's been changed are the names, they're like, did he really kill people this way? No, he didn't. But now there's this legend that he did kill people this way. It's creating a lot more problems than helpful. You know, it's not helping at all. It's just a way for you to make money, which is fine. It is also one of the first films that kind of like was a part of this like slasher genre. It was before Friday the 13th, which was kind of when this stuff started to take off. But like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Town That Dreaded Sundown. I mean, Chainsaw Massacre is, I think, a little bit more, I would say it's a little bit more gruesome. The stuff that happens in that is like really, really messed up. I watched it with my dad like recently. I would say like probably within like the last 6 months. We did a whole. My dad is part of the reason I'm so into horror and stuff. He shout out to Jim Geis. He he and I watch horror movies together all the time, whether they're good or bad, doesn't matter. We just like watching them. And we did this whole marathon of like the originals. So we watched like the first Chucky. We watched the first Nightmare on Elm Street. We watched the first, you know, Friday the 13th. We did that whole sort of thing. And I had never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre before. And he was like, oh, we have to watch it. And even I was like, this is dark. Like, this is really dark. But if you want me to do an episode on slasher films, I'm really into that. I'm really into that, and I would love to do that because I love slasher films. I'm like a big makeup person. I love special effects makeup. I love beauty makeup. I love makeup in general. And for a while, I used to watch slasher films and stuff like that, and then try to recreate what they did in the film with the practical effects. Because I am such a bitch for practical effects. I think it works so much better than CGI. You know, come at me, fight me, do it. I dare you. But like, I just think that's practical effects are so lost nowadays because of the technology that we have. But a lot of times, like that can work so much better than CGIing someone exploding. You know, like just a simple slit of the throat effect can be so much better and more beneficial to a film. Anyway, that is pretty much all the information that I have about these murders. Let me know future ideas. I have a running list, and every time I talk to people about the podcast, they say, why don't you try this? Oh, have you thought about doing this? And I'm like, that would make such a good episode. And I write it down because I like to know. I like to know what you guys want. I like to know what you guys are thinking, how you guys are interacting. I think I'm going to do probably a couple more episodes in this season and then take a break and kind of get feedback, see what's working, what isn't working. Again, this is like an in-between time of the 45-minute and the 30-minute mark. Let me know if this sort of timestamp is easier for you to listen to, or if for true crime stuff, you want it to be super long and detailed. If you like just the basic overview, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking. It's a general communication. You can let me know via Instagram or email. Both of those are Whispers from Below. No spaces, no underscores, no uppercase, no nothing. And it's at Gmail for the email. So it's whispersfrombelow@gmail.com. You can shoot me an email. You can send me a direct message on Instagram. I'm trying to be more present on Instagram and post things and let people know what's going on. Tell your friends. Tell all your friends. Share something if you'd like. It would be really helpful. It would mean a lot to me. I don't have a ton of listeners right now. And the more listeners I can get, the more content I can make for you, and the more things that I can get out there in the world for you to listen to. So if you really like this, please share it with your friends. Please let everybody you know. I'm on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify. I post things on YouTube as well. So there's no excuse. You got to listen to it. There's no excuses. There's no way that you can't listen to it. It's going to find you somehow, some way. especially because if you listen to it now, you're going to get targeted ads, and that's the best. So let's just keep a couple things in mind. Phantom Killer was never caught. Shooting people is lazy. And be careful if you're ever in your car trying to make out with your loved one on a secluded road. Just like look behind you. If a car passes, maybe don't sit there. Maybe don't be in that situation in the first place. Just use your common sense, you know?